On March of 2009, in a house in the Madrid neighborhood of Miralles, Juan Hill, a 57-year-old man, dies in his house in the middle of strong convulsions. When the police arrive, they check that there are no signs of violence, but everything indicates that it has not been a natural death. Music. Police, hello, good morning, Tiago from the Suma, to ask you for a collaboration on Pico de los Artilleros Street. But what happens is convulsion in an adult person, and the environment is a bit of a mess that we have sent a rapid intervention vehicle, a woman domestic employee who is going to do her chores at the home in the district of Miralles, discovers the owner agonizing. Then she calls first certain relatives. These activate the emergency services, and the emergency services go to the home that had a previous pathology, had a bronchodilator problem. After the action of these services, it is not possible to resuscitate him, and finally, he died. To claim to find the center convulsing, and the family has appeared. We are going there. Logically, many questions arise. We are talking about an accidental death, a natural death, or really someone has caused it to him. If so, who has done it? And why, once he has already died, we move to the place given the possibility that it is a death of homicidal etiology. And the first information, or the first thing that can be observed in that scene, is the corpse. The body is completely naked on top of the bed and has foam in the mouth. That is, it is not a death. That he has died being asleep in his bed. The corpse, the truth, is that it was impressive because in something had foam all over the face from long with big foam, that the man, had he had burst from inside the person who finds Juan Gil agonizing, is only witness of this finding has not heard or seen anything that can help the investigators. Others will be the mute witnesses that allow to clarify the facts of fingerprints and the DNA that appear in the scene. The scene is preserved, no one outside. The actors is allowed to enter the bedroom, that nothing is touched, that no object is manipulated, the corpse is not moved, of course, that never is preserved intact until the arrival of the judge by deception has to determine which of the people who have been there and with what purpose, with the intention of comparing their fingerprints by the vestiges that may have been left there with those that could be found of the criminal. First, a general view is made of how everything is. The site, the house photographs, video, DNA is started to be collected, then objects are collected for the laboratory. And then we already start to apply chemical reagents in the whole house to each time the hands are protected, evidences are collected there in a place. And then once the corpse has already been removed, the next step is the next day, the autopsy. The next day, we attend the autopsy. The forensic determines in a first assessment that he may have died from acute pulmonary edema. Therefore, we are talking about a purely natural death. But however, there is something to policemen that catches their attention, but that, yes, led by their experience, by their instinct, they begin to suspect that behind this case, there may be something more. There are no external signs of violence. But yes, there are evident signs of terror. The drawers open, everything thrown on the floors. Practically all the instances were searched with the relatives of one. First estimation is made of what is missing, and already at that first moment, several computers are missing, some photographic camera, watches cached. Then this already makes us suspect that this man at some point in the night was accompanied. The investigators suspect that Juan Hill may have been intoxicated with the aim of robbing him. In this type of modus operandi, the detection of certain substances is important. We did not know what substances we were looking for, but yes, we knew that there was something, and apart from a first estimation and an examination, different samples are taken that are also sent to laboratories from the National Institute of Toxicology and Forensic Sciences. We determine the shipments of samples that they make us in the judicial context. The reports that we carry out as experts of the administration of justice must be key in this type of investigation processes. We carry out a study of toxicological information, a study of drugs or of a chemical compound, which would be immersed either in a death or a living subject, who in his usual consciousness would not have taken them. It is determined once the analyses have been carried out in a laboratory in the organism of Juan Hill. There are two substances. Let's say it like this. We're talking about doxy in the mind, and those more two sedative substances. Clonazepam is a drug prescribed by a doctor. It is not over the counter, which is indicated as anxiolytic, as relaxing with the possibility of inducing sleep. Doxy, the mind, is a drug which is indicated as antihistamine, but has an indication as sleep inducer, as hypnotic sedative. Here, it is worth asking if the person who has used these substances knew the potential they had, and if so, if he knew that they could cause death. The fact of taking high amounts both of these two drugs of alcohol is another depressant substance of the central nervous system, would not add the effects, but would enhance them, would multiply their effects. There have been cases of patients who could enter into coma while the Seen at his death is inspected. The homicide agents investigate the last days of life of one Guild 2 investigators. What they try in an immediate way is to reconstruct the last hours of this person, the victim with whom he has been, where he has moved, how he has arrived there. And what are the circumstances of his last hours that condition us a lot? The whole investigation, the habitual life, is investigated in the day-to-day of Juanes, who was separated, had a fruit shop and a bar, and although others manage them, but yes, they control them regarding relatives. If he has any enemy, if he has had problems, if he has antecedents, and is being investigated, all that type of events is looked at in detail. The agents of Group 5 of Homicide find out that one Gil had spent the night in a very well-known place in Paseo de la Habana, Madrid, where men of advanced age usually go to seek the company of young ladies he could meet there. The person who ended his life is recognized by a waitress as that indeed he had been there having drinks, that he was a regular customer of Juan Spoke, well, that he is an educated person who attends with certain regularity to have some drinks. She also recognizes that it is frequented by prostitutes who go looking for clientele, and that in that place contact are made among the witnesses that the police interrogate is the doorman of the building, who also does night watchman duties. This man affirms with total certainty that the previous night he saw Juan Quinn arrive in his car, but only the question we ask ourselves is how that third person arrived. There was already, before the house, arrived by another entrance, that he did not control the doorman. He enters alone. Then our hypothesis is that he already arrives by another way, by another means, by almost the others, and waits for him in the portal from a point where he cannot be observed by the doorman. The possibility is raised that one Gil has been able to be victim of what is known as a kiss of sleep. It is known as kiss of sleep, the technique that is to seduce a man, throw something in the drink, some narcotic, some product that causes him unconsciousness or loss, or once they are at their mercy, these women rob them and do what they want to home. This type of action, professionals call it, with truly sonorous concept, chemical submission. We talk about chemical submission when that surreptitiously, that we try to seek the vulnerability of the other subject. We try to modify his degree of consciousness. We try to modify his degree of alertness, causing the condition that this person is not a determining person with his acts. What is sought precisely is literally to annul the will of the person, so that he is carrying this process ultimately of loss of comfort in the case of a subject who may have ingested or have been made to ingest two depressant drugs of the central nervous system. Yes, it falls within probably, and what is related to assaults with crimes facilitated by the use of drugs. Complaints for chemical submission have multiplied in recent years, according to data from the civil guard. It occurs due to the intake of the so-called voluntary or other tranquilizers that annul the will of the victims. At that time, there was a lot of this of the little glasses that they threw things, but not only in the homes and bars, and in places like that it became fashionable diazepam, that they threw it to man. He drinks it, and Ike's stunned and took everything from him. I was preparing for home in slow search. If I start to feel bad, music, I end up collapse, big pound outside, take off my watch, and I try to pull the arm, and could not. Recently, a team of doctors from the Malaga hospital have concluded that 1 in 3 aggressions have these components, that is, the person who is attacked is sedated, so that literally loses his will. Therefore, we see that it is something more habitual than we think. Well, it is true that drugs like doxylamine or clonazepam have certain bitterness for which, yes, we could detect that they could have thrown us something depending also on us from our side of consciousness, as we are taking alcohol continuously, is usually involved in this type of context. The most common substance used in cases of chemical submission is the well-known biotangoscopolamine, but it is not this the only substance that is used. There are drugs of legal use that, administered in an abusive way or without keeping the medical proportions, cause the same effects, even being able to reach death. There have not been cases like the band of the clumsiness that acted, and yes, there are similar cases that continue to act in clubs of all turn, and even in houses of appointments. What they did is sleep with some substance to the victims to rob him, pass the card to the data phone of the club, and rob him all the money that was in his account. At this point, the scientific police tries to find evidence that helps to identify the alleged author or authors of the poisoning. Fingerprints of these people appeared in a bottle of rum and in a glass. Then what is exposed indicates that because the person first threw in the drink of the fool, some criminals are especially careful. They have what we call forensic awareness and knowledgeable of the police and criminalistic investigation techniques. Erase all their fingerprints in order to avoid being detected. Others, on the other hand, are much more sloppy and leave in the scene on the corpse all kinds of fingerprint, dactyloscopic polymer, or organic remains that allow to extract their DNA. In this bottle, there was not a single Mine, Crane, there was a dog of them. What happens is that when you serve yourself from a bottle with the fingerprint steps on the other, really the one that is going to remain is the last fingerprint that has touched that bottle, because their remain stepped on they are erased, and then it is not worth for such characteristic points, because we have to count 8 characteristic points, so that a fingerprint for us has validity a few years ago to obtain. In an optimal way, a digital fingerprint, it was needed that this be deposited on a smooth surface, smooth and polished. Now, any support can receive a fingerprint. And the most important, the police can detect it. Each person has his fingerprint. That is, there are no two equal. The source is similar, but equal is exactly not than what we try to look for. Is this, for example, this is a delta. This is another delta. And then what looks, this is a point, this is a turn, this is a nucleus, then all these. Little things, only what we are looking for. If a fingerprint appears in a place where a crime has been committed, and pray that you invent something good. Because if you do not have it clear, the work of the scientific police bears fruit, and the result provides essential information. The fingerprints of the alleged murderer are identified. In this case, the fundamental element is when scientific calls and tells us that it has revealed several fingerprints in the home, several fingerprints of a person with antecedents. Then we already have name and surnames. It is a person who already has antecedents of criminal acts previously. That is why it costs in the database. And this is a fact that is fundamental for the 5th group of homicides that takes charge of the investigation. We are talking about Veronica Elizabeth Prado Mera, a person who lived at that time in Spain, but who was also in a legal situation with the fingerprints found in the home of Juan G. The police already has a direct suspect. It is Veronica Prado. It seems technological. It would be immediately to go detain her, but he appreciates he has powerful reasons not to do it at that moment. The investigation continues with that evidence it could have proceeded to look for and detain this person, but it is a single evidence. He could have said that, yes, that at some point he has been in that home, but that specifically that night he was not with the one. He had been any other night. They can say that they were there partying with him and they left and he was still alive. Then we opt to do a broader and deeper investigation, group 5 of homicides. What it does from that moment is to try to look for similar events that have been reported that have occurred in recent times in this geographical area. It was in the spring of the year 2009 when it became known that there was a woman acting to the technique called the versus sleep. And also the police suspected that she could also be behind the death of another man occurred in the Salamanca neighborhood 2 years before the year 2007. We find several cases in different districts of Madrid, San Blas, in Senate complaint of 2007, in which Jesus Cifuentes dies. And here we find rereading the police report. As the procedure is the same, the call that the colleagues receive is that of a person who requests emergency services because he gets up, he is woken up dazed, and has discovered the corpse of his companion. And the home rummage, that is the same. In the first case, fingerprints of 2 women appear, and in the second one appears the same. Says game of 8, these are dedicated to what they are dedicated in April of 2000. 7, the same modus operandi have been used on this occasion with 2 victims. One of them died, the other with luck was able to save his life, and offer with it an invaluable testimony for the investigators 2 years before. On April 22nd, 2007, Jesus Cifuentes, of 47 years, convinces a friend to go out together with 2 women that he has just met. He told me that their known 2 girls were in favor of going out with him after having something plaza. Mayor. Then from there we took a case, and we went to the Rochier room, and there we were having some gossip until 2 and something. 3.5, and we came to the house, and we sat before we started to talk about seeing that no more ropes more consume alcohol. They moved his home to maintain, in theory, sexual relations. And what happens the next morning is that one wakes up dazed, next day estranged, said how strange that this man, because he used to get up early, that he will not get up. And when I left my room, and when the other, he was already lying down, I was giving him, I say, some they walked not normal that I did not remember, and the next thing he remembers is waking up dazed, and next to him is his companion, deceased, Jesus Cifuentes. And the home rummaged and different objects and cash were missing, that the cabinets were open, that they come given rummaging unknown said that they took from me. And you see that I do not value the crucifix at that moment. I had in my house 1,500 euros, and I had the hunch of being able to have people here at home and have here the money and steal from. The hidden, I did not have a plastic bag. I hid it from error detergent, the washer. And yes, they were rummaging, but I will not love the first hypothesis that is handled from the police was that he could be victim of the kiss of sleep, because also the man with whom he accompanied his friend that night, yes, survived, and explained that they went to his house, that they were in that floor prints of Vergara, and that they had given him some substance because he had gotten up, well, bad state in his. Companion Soligo was wrapped Antonio, companion of Jesus, is the one who warns emergency services, and I believe that he was asleep, and he was pushing him until the service plugs with a shower hose, and you see that we do not react and run out music, but the medical center that is at Theon's, and nothing already came a doctor, sir, and said that we find that there was a corpse in the bathroom thrown and in the toilet. It was seen that to my friend something a party well. There were bottles and glasses on the table, cans with the bottles of rum was error, and prepared one of them, but that I wanted to put music. When well there until now we boil video, that's something they've thrown, you said, called glasses, bottles, we collected some cigarette. But that were there, but we took the DNA that is the first so as not to contaminate in me, that it degrades, then we collected objects for the chemical, laboratory for fingerprint revelation, and then we proceed to apply reagents to all the tables, glasses, everything you can imagine, the doors, everything I want to put in the complaint. And they called me from here. And then they showed me books of photos and such, but no, I recognize them 100%. They were Latin American. I do not know exactly from what country. As a result of the investigations of this complaint of 2007 in the home, the police detects fingerprints of two people. One is, we know, the other Veronica Prado. They mounted operation at police station and managed to detain Elsa, and here they obtain a testimony, also fundamental for the investigation, and that is curious to us and very much benefit for the cause. Elsa Venus Toledo is detained by the police, and curiously in all the rocambolesque that this case can be, she facilitates a phone of a friend, so that please call her and announce her detention. The phone corresponds to Veronica, Elizabeth Degree, but however the police agents do not manage to locate her. The colleagues, when they detain Elsa, well, logically, they try to gather data for the detention also of Veronica, but it is not possible. They do not get with the whereabouts of the same with which they pass the judicial disposition to Elsa. Therefore, Veronica continues free and continues being able to do, well, practically what until that moment seemed to have done on the floor, that they shared. There is a third person, another girl, who tells the police that Veronica and her companion have been for a long time hooking up mature men, drugging them and robbing them, and nobody to Paula, when taking her statement in police stations, relates the procedure they use if to create to the police that on some occasion she has seen these manipulating a kind of blue substance that they mix with vitamins, and that it seems to be Veronica's mother sends her directly from Ecuador, even comes to testify that in her home in the bag of the alleged culprits, she has come to find objects that supposedly belong to the tactical people. The final objective was to rob by the means that were, and with the consequence that were, until death, because she must be aware that the substance she was using and the amount she was using, as others saw that they could end the life of her victims. Veronica tells her that she had heard something about a death of the person with whom indeed she had drinks one determined night, but she does not pay too much attention to it. Does not matter to her the amount of substance she has to administer when she ultimately gets what she wants, which is money, and effect that she can make cash. All the victims are men, males of advanced age, who frequent night leisure places where they can meet younger women. We are behind the trail of a predator who seeks this type of victims. The early morning of May 1st, the poison of the kiss of sleep acts again. This time, they do it in Alcala. The Henares her victim is Isidoro Rioja, a 64-year-old Manical, is received at the police station, in which a person states that he has gone to his father's home, and when he has entered the interior, well, he has seen that the home was rummaged, and that also his father was lying on the floor unconscious. In this case, the scene that the agents find is practically identical. We have a person of a certain age who seems to be literally groggy. That is, he has completely lost consciousness. Perhaps the interesting thing about this event, and what saves this person's life, is the fact that it is his son, who finds him with enough time to be transferred to hospital, and in this way receive the medical attentions that end up observing the life. Once he has been transferred to hospital to task our mission, now proceeds to try to gather the maximum possible way, check the witnesses that are in this area that can help us to clarify the facts. Isidoro Rioja survives this situation, and the time he is in condition, declares before the police this man says that he is in a disco that night, and that they're known some girls, and one of them has offered to accompany him home, not to do it once there, and well have a drink. Advance the relation. Scientific police appears at the crime scene, take again fingerprints, organic remains from which to extract DNA by scientific police. The glasses are collected, that even in some of them a substance is observed inside, but on this occasion there is another invisible witness. The security cameras of the home were that to the victim's workplace, and Of course, it is going to be a transport company had security cameras. In viewing the security cameras, when we checked that a woman had been in that home, entering the rooms, leaving and entering, collecting objects, introducing inside a suitcase, and subsequently leaves at home the attempted homicide is a key point. Because although it is true that she prepared very well in cases in which she got into as in the ones in which she perpetrated, yes, it is true that then she did not have too many security measures either, because she left fingerprints. She was aggravated in the case of Sedoro. In Alcala, the Heneres aggravated by the security cameras. The next step for us that is raised, given that this home is well on the outskirts of Alcala, is that this person has had to leave that place, move with that suitcase in some way, and it was very strange that she had gone with a suitcase at those hours, pulling it towards Alcalá, Heneres, or towards Madrid, which we raised what would have been her means of transport. And the only way that could be were two, or that someone would come to pick her up with a vehicle, or through a taxi service. She asked for a taxi, and then the taxi driver's testimony was fundamental to identify her, and to speak with her whereabouts was defining, and the absolute clear to put name to those images that will do this previous. When you make that call to the taxi driver, she in some way is already leaving a mark. She is already leaving the police an open door to be able to identify the pressure, allowed us, underscore, a line of investigation that led us to check that there was another group of Madrid working a similar issue to this to ours. Just like in our case of Madrid, fingerprints also appear, traces of Veronica appear, and there is already, when a decision is made to work together with Alcala, the Heneres, the two investigative teams, a home of Madrid, the judicial police group of Alcala, the Heneres begin to work as a team. At those moments we cannot put a search and capture order, because if it is detected by any patrol, logically they would have to detain her. And we did not have all the probatory base that we intended. We were missing various laboratory reports. And it was decided to use other investigation measures requested, as played that instructed the case. And with that, what we intended was to achieve more evidence from that moment. The police closely follows each of the movements of Veronica Prado, that we already have a home even where this person can live. Well, what it is about, of course, given the seriousness of the facts, is to start a continuous surveillance, not only a surveillance that is done in situ and in the door of the home previously, to that there are many investigations, what is done, obtain judicial warrants, so that there's a telephone listening well, so that we can say triangulate the phone. It is necessary, and different devices are established with personnel tracking devices, and it is done for a time, what is called in police slang a tranca, which is surveillance outside. And we start through surveillances and the observations. You can get to know a little her way of life, when she goes out, at what times, what schedules, when she goes partying or to work, in quotes, until the scene. That it is the moment in which we have to act, taking into account that we have to withdraw her with evidence, but also to avoid that occurs greater evil, and that and fall to fourth and last. We continue with the investigation. We narrow the circle. We discover more cases. And the fear is that she gathers money, and at a given moment decides to hear from the country, with which her detention finally arises. And to avoid risk situations, the investigators go into action and detain Veronica Prado Ovra. On May 29th, the policemen who follow her decide to detain her with her hands in the dough. I am from memories in the afternoon with a surveillance, and the last hour of the night we observe how two women leave a home and go with wigs, heels very short. It will be to seduce her victim by the appearance. They had it as easy presumed that they were going to work very made up, very well dressed with wigs, perfumed. What draws their attention is that an habitual search that is carried out, every detained is found hidden under her clothes, a homicidal weapon, a judicial power official. What was to proceed to her first superficial registration, checking that between her underwear put in the bra she carried 4 little bags. A surprise ours is that 4 transparent little bags are found with a blue-colored liquid inside of little bags of a bluish substance, prepared to be used. That at the moment, we only understood quickly that it was the substance that she administered to her victims. And once the pertinent analysis is carried out, it gives us the mixture of clonazepam with doxylamine. We saw that she acts in a very cold, very calculated way, without any type of gesture, without any type of word. Her reaction surprised us a lot. That same night, once the detention is proceeded, and so as not to lose evidence, the judge who is on duty is requested, and that same night the entry and registration in the home of both detainees, of Veronica and of her partner. And there we find effects of the victims, the watches that had disappeared, both from a case here of Alcala, the Heneres computers, like the medications with which they prepared the substances. One they brought them from South America, and others they acquired them here and in Spain then. but it was evident that we had what we needed from then on. The police communicates that she is the alleged author of the death of A, man, and of the attempt to kill a second already also mature, and that it is suspected that she was also involved in the death of another man 2 years before the area of the Salamanca neighborhood police detained 2 women accused of sleeping with illegal substances men that they captured in discotheques. To rob them, 2 of them have died after ingesting a drug known as the kiss of sleepless substance that the detainees dissolved in their drinks they used the party rooms to establish contact with men, and when they administer the drug, then they went to their home where they seized their money and valuables with the detention of Veronica Prado, the victims of the kiss of sleep cease in Madrid, but who really this woman. When the police detain Veronica Prado, they find themselves before a 34-year-old person of whom it is known that since she arrived in Spain, she has not exercised a profession that has not been prostitution. She has an extensive curriculum, but what stands out. The police is the absolutely deceiving character of this person. She is asked about the procedure, why she does it. And such we are before a woman cold that does not care. She has no feelings. Her end is to obtain the maximum money possible. We were able to verify that she had made various shipments to her country, to Ecuador. And well, then we are before a person who has no type of remorse regarding what she was doing. Profile of this woman is, I think that it is that of a psychopath, in as much as when she is not a woman who is sick, be simply as a woman who embodies evil, that evil not to have empathy with your victim, that it does not matter to you what happens, is what happens to him, even if he moves. And I think that is the profile she is. She was aware with which, without any type of scruples, then she was cold calculating, and without any type of empathy towards Asia, toward her victims. But what was not known at that moment was that she already had antecedents in Guayaquil, giving such, for having been poisoning more young mature men, but also younger, to rob him, and even had been part of some band. The Spanish police checks the antecedents of the detained of Ecuadorian origin and checks what in her country. They already had numerous antecedents related to these techniques of drugging the victims. If you ask me for the steps of Veronica Prado Mera in Ecuador, we can go back to April 20th, 2002 in Guayaquil province of Guayas. In that site, the police detained her along with a friend. They were detained for using sleeping pills and putting 2 young men to sleep in the south of Guayaquil, and stripping them. The 2 young women got into a vehicle with the boys and took them to a house of appointments where they stripped them. Veronica's detained in Ecuador, imprisoned shortly after she is released on provisional release, waiting for trial 5 years later. When she is required by the courts, she is no longer in her country. The judge Manrique called the defendant's paradise and Montoya to trial for crime of theft, and the preventive prison of them was confirmed then, of which the defense of them asked for a bail, the which was accepted. We remember it was accepted, and they managed to leave the country. In the year 2007, Jesus dies. We know what had been his country of destination, these crimes, or the ones that use that denominated as weight of sleep to carry out their acts, do not know borders. Practically, we can say that they have occurred in very many countries of the world. But yes, it is true that with special virulence in the decade of the 90s, at the beginning of the 21st century, they especially prey on Ecuador. The sweet dreams of criminal mode that the bands of assailants use in Guayaquil and all Ecuador to put their victims to sleep and rob them to their boom. Between 2002 and 2003, the Ecuadorian authorities attributed the criminal acts to prostitutes or ladies of company who chose their victims in night entertainment centers. What happens is that, unlike what will later happen in Spain, the profile is very diverse. We do not have a common pattern of person. We do not have a common pattern of men. But the spectrum is so wide that evidently confuses the investigators. There is no exact figure of the victims of these criminals, because many of them feel shame of their friends or their family of knowing that they went to a bar to look for women and were assaulted, an assault without, however, in 2017, the police revealed that there were 411 robberies using psychotropic substances or tranquilizers. 2016, the figure was much higher, with 577 cases the same year, 2002, in which Veronica is finally detained by the streets of Guayaquil. A young Spanish of 22 years appears, to whom, for the police, given the state he presents, is a man who goes semi-naked, has no documentation, none, is totally lost, is not aware of what he is doing, is as if he had taken some type of substance that has led him to that state. They had administered him an overdose of a very powerful sedative by these bands, by these women who integrate and who work under this criminal modality of the sweet dreams. He could not be identified first and was taken to Provisional Detention Center Guayaquil. Then he was also transferred to Lorenzo Ponce Psychiatric Hospital, where he received treatment, and his state of health was determined to send him to spy in October 2010. The trial against Veronica Prado begins a prosecution asked for 33 years in prison for a murder, a frustrated homicide, and 2 robberies with violence. And today the trial has begun against a woman accused of killing a man with the method known as the kiss of sleep. The accused conquered men in night leisure. Places convinced them to have a drink at their home, and they drugged them to rob them when she killed. And almost ends also with the life of another man. The accused seems to have recognized part of the facts that are imputed to her, not to the totality. And well, then it was the practice evidence the rest of the witnesses have corroborated what the accused has stated. Her behavior during the trial was a very cold behavior, and she had no qualms about saying what good that is and what truth that she administered substances to the victim, but that at no time what good that she only dispensed sleep. She did not have that dare and say that in the room. Her statements, well, they are very clear and are contundent. Okay. She has recognized part of the facts and has recognized what everyone knew team that she was dedicated to that, and that she stole. Okay, the rest she has not recognized, and it is merely accidental. We have to wait for the trial to develop complete and the rest of the cures, and then she had to recognize that she had participated in those facts, but only in the robberies because the evidence was contundent against him during the trial. Peronista recognizes that she used these products to rob her victims, but says that she never intended to kill them. The question is that a person who does not know the scope of these products can cause death. One of the testimonies that was key during the trial was that of Nadia Velasquez, because Veronica herself recognized, as this first said, that they had been living together. Susana Diaz assured that on some occasion of some news that came out in informative media of the death of people of men, in these circumstances, she had asked her what had happened, and she had said that yes, that indeed on some occasions some of the men to whom she had robbed had died before the question of Nadia herself, and if it had been due to overdose. Veronica's response was very clear. She said that yes, she has denied that she intended to kill anyone that crossed her mind, and she has said it very clear. And I think that we've all heard it. Okay, what was her intention? Well, really what she does, because they rob with a method that is very scandalous, but she no longer intends, nor has she ever intended to kill anyone. If she is as scandalized as everyone when she found out that some person had died because of that, the forensic report showed that the substances used with the victims had a high lethal potential even in smaller doses. And separately, all this was seen increased when they were united and also mixed with alcohol. The dose, well, I only go to do what she has. Said she took it already. Nothing has ever happened, okay, with which she did not intend anything to happen to anyone, okay? She already took it to sleep. That is what she has told us. And it is what I think, okay, if the dose that she already used is the same, that she has been able to use our people, the minimum amount of the doses that was established was around 23 times the recommended dose by the byfact of the medication. And so the experts said, well, doses of up to 23 times the recommended for health, with which it had devastating results for her victims, of course, as was seen. I do not think she intended beyond that she fell asleep, nor, let's say, to ensure that she could do what she did afterwards without any problem. One of the fundamental testimonies of the fundamental evidence is the one provided by the taxi driver. There are 2 versions. One, the family of Isidoro believes that he could be in cahoots with her, because also he gave him a GPS. He gave him a GPS for the taxi that came from the place. He gave it precisely to Isidoro. But on the other hand, the police believe that it had been by circumstance entangled in all this matter, but that he had nothing to do with them. Isidoro Rioja, one of the victims who managed to survive the tactics of Veronica Prado, assured that in the mount in which they met, he carried a sanitary medal where he warned that he suffered a cardiac pathology of this measure. Simply put, take Centrum. It is a habitual medication in people who have this type of cardiac pathologies. Regarding the little plate engraved in gold with the inscription of Centrone, any person who reads it, well, it is easily understandable that that person needed or had a potential danger and needed a determined assistance. It was possible to prove in the trial that she was aware of that disease, and that by administering that substance she had to foresee that this person could die. When finally Isidoro is found by his son in the state practically about to die, we can say it. What caught the attention of his son is that the father in the first place did not have a shirt on, and the medal had disappeared, who took it from him in the trial. As natural, you know that not the cameras have images of the security cameras of the company Isidoro Rioja. In those images, Veronica was recognized as the person who dragged the suitcase of Chavi the day of the company. We cannot verify how many robberies they have committed. What, yes, we can verify that in accounts. Complaints of same characteristics. There are around 9 in a year, and half of the years after 2 months from the beginning of the trial, but neither captured is condemned to 29 years in prison. The sentence also asks that the death of Jesus Cifuentes in 2007 be investigated to prove the facts, and with Veronica facing an important condemnation, the investigators come to the conclusion that also this case may be linked with that of Jesus Cifuentes. In the case of Source, it was no longer possible to go back because we were not going to find that substance. But the modus operandi was nailed. It was identical. Therefore, it is asked to exhume the corpse of this person. But nothing can be done because Jesus Cifuentes have been integrated. I understand that in the case of Jesus Cifuentes, they did not manage to find with which the criminal type that they could apply was that of violent robbery. The defense of Veronica Prado appealed the sentence alleged violation of fundamental rights to effective judicial tutelage and to the presumption of innocence, defended that the ruling had been predetermined 6 months. Later, the Supreme Court dismisses the appeal and confirms a condemnation of 29 years in prison against Veronica Prado. Veronica was condemned to what it is worth asking. If it had not been so, if finally she had not ended up with her bones in jail, she could have continued committing this type of crimes. Well, then, in view of the curriculum that she already brought, before starting to do what she did in Spain, it gives a sensation that the answer would be affirmative, and the very condemnatory sentence established a maximum period of compliance with a condemnation of 25 years. She would leave in freedom of fully complying with it until the year 2034. In reality, from the first quarter of condemnation, Veronica Prado has been able to request permits and at half of the condemnation, and even request expulsion to her country if these people had not been able to be detained with addressed substances to commit those facts. The other facts, well, they would surely have remained, they would not have remained demonstrated, or that they would have remained in the robberies with violence. Time gave us reason, and having done a long-term development investigation, and led us to obtain a good number of evidence and attest the sentence and the condemnation to which she is subjected. And if we had taken a short path, it is already my personal opinion, she would have continued acting, and possibly we would have been lamenting other personal misfortunes. I am totally sure that there are many more cases of that people who evidently has not died, but who has been victim, and who will never say what has happened out of shame. The ironic thing about this case is that Veronica Prado, who was condemned for facts committed by her in a trial with guarantees, and in a democratic state, and of law, it turns out that now her environment is claiming that she be transferred to Ecuador, because here she is suffering an excessively for Veronica Elizabeth degree Mera served sentence in the prison of Topa Salamanca. The truth is that as far as is known until today, she has never shown remorse for the act for which she was condemned and for which it was concluded that she carried out. Justice managed to prove that Veronica Prado killed Juan Healy and almost ended the life of Isidoro Rioja. What we will never know, 21, her name, is behind other victims of the kiss of sleep who never came to report.